The West Wing of St. Jude's Hospital slept like a dying beast. Machines sighing, fluorescent lights flickering, the faint rhythm of distant heart monitors echoing through tiled corridors. It was 2:47 a.m., that fragile hour when even the clocks seemed tired of ticking. Elias had worked these halls for 20 years. He knew every creak, every stubborn doorknob, every patch of floor that squeaked under his mop. The hospital had changed over the years. New paint, new staff, new machines, but the West Wing stayed mostly forgotten. It had been closed to patients for renovations that never came, yet the hospital administrators still wanted it kept spotless. So Elias cleaned, night after night, alone. His keys clinked at his hip as he pushed the mop bucket down the long, silent corridor. He carried dozens, steel, bronze, black plastic topped, labeled with fading tags. They were his comfort, a symphony of tiny voices that reminded him he belonged here. That night, one of them jingled differently. A sound too heavy, too hollow. Elias paused. The brass key caught his eye, old, ornate, the metal darker than the rest, etched with faint, swirling patterns. He frowned. He didn't remember it. It hadn't been there yesterday, or any other day. He held it under the dim light, turning it over. The tag was missing. No number, no letter, just a single, tiny notch carved into the bow, like a crescent moon. He tried to recall the last time he'd been issued a new key, but it had been years. And management wasn't exactly organized. Maybe he'd mixed it up from another custodian's ring. He shrugged, set his bucket aside, and started testing it on the storage doors. Click. Nothing. Another door. Nothing. Each lock refused it, as though it didn't belong anywhere in this world. Elias reached the end of the corridor where the last door stood, the one that led to the disused ICU room. Except tonight, something was different. He stopped dead. There was another door, right next to the ICU, where he knew there had always been a blank stretch of wall. A new door waited, pale green, freshly painted, its metal handle gleaming under the cold light. It had a small window, the kind used in patient rooms, but the glass was black from within, like someone had draped cloth over it. Elias blinked, heart fluttering. He looked back down the hall. Empty. No footsteps, no sound but the slow drip of a leaky faucet somewhere behind him. He approached the door. The brass key trembled against his belt loop, as though eager. He hesitated only a moment before sliding it into the lock. It fit perfectly. The door clicked open. Inside was a small patient room, unremarkable at first glance. A single bed, neatly made. White sheets, pale blanket folded at the foot. The overhead light flickered weakly, but stayed on. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, and something else beneath it, something sour, like old flowers and forgotten air. A clipboard hung from the foot of the bed. Elias stepped closer, squinting to read it. Patient name, Elias Grant. Admitted, TBD. Status, pre-admission. He froze. His throat went dry. He reached out a trembling hand and touched the paper. It was real. His own name, his handwriting in the corner where custodian was printed under staff remarks. He took a step back. The monitor beside the bed flickered to life. A green line appeared. A faint blip, a heartbeat, then another. The rhythmic beeping filled the room. Elias stumbled backward, heart hammering, eyes darting to the hallway. But when he turned to flee, the door had closed. He grabbed the handle and twisted. Locked. He pounded on the door, his voice cracking. Hey, anybody out there? Silence. The beeping grew louder. He turned back. The bed was no longer empty. Something lay under the sheets now. A shape. A man's shape. Elias's stomach dropped. The body under the blanket rose and fell faintly, as if breathing. No. He crept forward, unwilling but unable to stop himself. The air thickened, the smell of rot and old metal pressing against his nostrils. He reached the bed, trembling, and lifted the corner of the sheet. He saw himself, his own face, waxy and pale, eyes closed. His name tag still pinned to his uniform shirt. The monitor's beeping synchronized with his racing pulse. Then the eyes opened. Elias screamed. He stumbled backward, knocking over the four-stand, crashing into the wall. The other Elias sat up in the bed, head tilting slowly, eyes lifeless and black. "Who's cleaning tonight?" The voice croaked, his voice warped and hollow. The lights flickered violently. The walls seemed to close in, paint bubbling, the floor trembling underfoot. Elias bolted for the door, slamming his fists against it. The handle turned this time, too easily, and he spilled out into the corridor. The hallway was wrong now. Longer, dimmer. The lights pulsed like a slow heartbeat. His cart was gone, his mop bucket gone. Only the faint jingle of the brass key echoed behind him. He ran, past storage rooms, past empty nurse stations, past the endless hum of machines. The corridor didn't end. He turned corners that looped back into themselves. Each hallway led him back to the same green door. Every time he passed it, the sign on the door changed. Room 0, Room Grant, Room Cleaned. Finally, gasping, he fell to his knees. The key slipped from his trembling fingers and clattered to the floor. He stared at it. The metal looked fresh now, gleaming as though it had been polished by countless hands. He picked it up. The crescent notch glowed faintly. He heard whispers then, dozens of them, soft, layered, like the murmurs of long-dead patients. They came from behind the walls. They called his name. He pressed his hands over his ears and shut his eyes. When he opened them again, he was standing beside his cart. The fluorescent lights hummed softly. The corridor looked normal again. His watch read 3:04 a.m. The green door was gone. At dawn, the nurses found Elias's cart parked neatly outside the west wing. His mop stood upright, the bucket still half full. On the cart lay a single brass key, its surface tarnished again, the crescent moon barely visible. They called for him, searched the storage rooms, the basement, even the boiler room. No sign. Later that morning, when the day shift began, a new clipboard appeared on the admissions counter. It had no date, no doctor's signature, just a single name, written neatly in pen. Elias Grant admitted. When they checked the west wing, the wall with a new door had been looked smooth and freshly painted. If you pressed your ear to it, though, just under the faint hum of the lights, you could hear the soft clink of a key ring and someone mopping in the dark. The moon hung low and swollen, tinted red like an old bruise. The people in town called it a blood moon, a bad omen, though Hank Miller had long stopped believing in omens. The only thing the moon ever did was light his way. It was nearing midnight in the small-town cemetery, and Hank was alone again. That was how he liked it. The dead were quiet company, and they didn't complain when you whistled off-key. He did that a lot, whistle while he worked, some tune he never quite remembered learning. It kept him calm, especially during the night shifts, when the wind rustled through headstones like whispering teeth. The grave he was digging that night was for a John Doe. No record, no kin, no flowers, no mourners expected. The sheriff had found the body near the highway 3 days ago. No ID, no wallet, no story. The coroner had muttered something about heart failure, but Hank had seen the look on the man's face before they zipped up the bag. That wasn't peace. That was surprise. Still, it wasn't his job to ask questions. He had a shovel, not a badge. He spat into his hands and dug, the metallic ring of steel biting in his soil, echoing in the crisp night air. The blood moon painted the mound of dirt beside him a deep, dark crimson. Every now and then, he paused to whistle, slow, drawn-out notes that drifted across the rows of graves like a lullaby for bones. After an hour or so, the grave was halfway done. He leaned on his shovel, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his sleeve. The lantern beside him swayed slightly in the breeze, casting long shadows that twisted across the uneven ground. That was when he heard it. A whistle, soft, distant, but unmistakably echoing his own tune. He froze. The sound carried from somewhere below, muffled, but perfectly in rhythm with him. It came again, faint, deliberate, from inside the half-dug grave. At first, he laughed, nervous and dry. "You boys think you're funny," he muttered, glancing toward the gate. The sheriff's deputies sometimes played tricks on him, hiding behind mausoleums, tossing pebbles, making ghost noises. But there was no one there. The cemetery stretched empty in every direction, just endless stones and crooked trees swaying beneath the red light. The whistling continued, faint, breathy, coming from below the soil. Hank's hands trembled around the shovel handle. He leaned over the grave, peering into the darkness. "Who's down there?" he barked. "If this is a joke, you best cut it out." The whistle answered him, this time louder. The same tune, note for note. "All right," Hank said, trying to steady his voice. "You asked for it." He lifted his lantern, its warm glow spilling down into the hole. The shadows shifted. Something pale glimmered under the dirt, just at the edge of the light. Then the earth moved. A puff of dust, a low groan. The ground inside the grave shifted, sinking slightly, like something was pushing up from underneath. Hank stumbled back, nearly dropping the lantern. Jesus! The soil bulged, cracked, and then a hand broke through. Dirty fingernails clawed into the loose earth, scraping against the edge of Hank's shovel. The hand was gray and swollen, veins black against the skin. Another whistle escaped the grave, louder now, wet and gurgling, but perfectly matched to his old tune. Hank's breath hitched. His mind screamed to run, but his legs stayed rooted. The hand twitched, fingers curling as if reaching for him. The lantern light flickered violently, casting the world into stuttering flashes. He stumbled backward, swinging his shovel wildly. The metal bit into the ground beside the hand, and the earth went still. The whistle stopped. Silence fell heavy as dirt. Hank stood there, chest heaving, heart pounding like a drum. He wiped his mouth, trembling. "Just my damn imagination," he whispered. He looked down again, and the hand was gone. Nothing but soil and shadow. He laughed nervously. "Too many night shifts, that's all." He picked up his shovel, set his jaw, and climbed back into the grave to finish the job. But as soon as his boots hit the bottom, the ground shifted again, this time from behind him. Something grabbed his ankle. He screamed and kicked, the shovel clattering against the dirt. A cold grip tightened around his leg, pulling. He twisted, trying to see, but the lantern had toppled, its light spinning across the graveyard like a dizzy eye. Another hand broke the surface. Then another. They reached for him, pale and slick, clawing their way upward. The soil churned like water as the whistling began again. Not one voice now, but two. His own tune, mirrored perfectly, as if the grave itself was singing back. He swung the shovel down, striking one hand, then another, the air filling with the smell of wet earth and something rotten. He clawed at the dirt wall, trying to climb out, but his boots slipped. The ground gave way beneath him. The last thing Hank saw was the blood moon staring down through the shifting soil like a single, unblinking eye. When the sun rose the next morning, the sheriff came to check on him. Hank was a reliable man, never missed a shift. The grave was finished. The mound was smooth, the edges clean. The coffin inside was sealed, undisturbed. But there were two shovels leaning against the headstone. One belonged to Hank. The other was older, rusted, its handle cracked, as if it had been buried long ago. And beside the John Doe's marker, there was a new headstone. No one in town remembered carving it. The stone was fresh, the letters perfectly etched. Hank Miller whistled till the end. The sheriff stood there a long time, staring at the words, listening to the wind hum through the trees. As he turned to leave, a faint sound drifted through the cemetery. A low, wandering whistle carried on the morning breeze. It came from nowhere, or everywhere. Some said the sound still rises from the ground on certain nights, when the moon bleeds red over St. Jude's Cemetery. A man's tune, soft and hollow, echoing between the graves. And if you listen too long, if you hum along, the ground might start to move beneath your feet. The storm rolled in before midnight, thick clouds blotting out the stars. The rain came in slanted sheets, hammering the tin roof of the county's emergency dispatch center like impatient fingers. Lightning cracked across the horizon, and for a brief second, the forest surrounding the building glowed white, a glimpse of twisted trees and telephone poles bending in the wind. Inside, Tanya Grace sat alone at her console. It was her third consecutive night shift, and fatigue tugged at her eyelids like heavy curtains. She took a sip of lukewarm coffee and stared at the cluster of monitors. Green lines, coordinates, open call logs, the usual endless hum of data. The dispatch center wasn't much. 4 desks, 3 radios, 1 flickering fluorescent light, and a backup generator that kicked on whenever the storm got too close. Most nights it was quiet. Calls about deer collisions, domestic disputes, power outages, the slow pulse of small-town emergencies. But tonight, something in the air felt wrong. It wasn't just the storm. It was the silence between the thunderclaps. The way the radio hissed, like someone whispering too softly to understand. Tanya tried to shake it off. She checked her shift log. 2:41 a.m. Her partner, Martin, was out sick again. She was the only dispatcher on duty until 6 o'clock. That was when the radio crackled. Static at first. The usual sputter of interference. Then a voice broke through. Male, mid-30s, strained and gasping. Dispatch, there's been... Crash. Route 6. 2 vehicles, need help, please. Tanya's training kicked in. She grabbed her headset. This is County Dispatch. Can you confirm your location? Route 6. The voice repeated, weaker now. Near mile marker 32. The transmission cut out. Tanya logged the call automatically, her fingers moving faster than her mind. She dispatched a patrol car and an ambulance, marking possible major accident, unknown injuries. Thunder rattled the glass panes. Copy that, came Officer Daniels' voice a minute later. I'm en route. Tanya watched his GPS signal blink across her screen as he drove through the storm. Rain hissed over the radio. Then silence. Daniels, status update? She asked. A pause. Dispatch, I'm at mile marker 32. There's nothing here. She frowned. Nothing. Negative. Road's clear. No vehículos. No debris. Just rain. Tanya's stomach tightened. Maybe wrong coordinates. I'll check the system. But there were no other calls. No duplicate pings. No open lines. Still, she replayed the recording, hoping for clarity. The voice came through again, clearer this time, a whisper wrapped in static. Crash. Route 6. She leaned closer to the speaker. Tanya Grace. Her blood ran cold. The caller had said her name. Not just ma'am or operator. Her name. The storm outside roared louder, wind howling through the vents. Tanya removed her headset, her pulse thudding in her ears. She stared at the console, the red recording light blinking steadily. This isn't funny, she muttered to herself. Not tonight. She checked the incoming call logs again. There it was. Call origin, line 1. Source, internal, console 3. Her own console. Tanya's throat went dry. She tried to rationalize. Maybe the system glitched. Maybe it was playback lag from the test line. But she hadn't run any test calls. A sudden bang from outside made her jump. Something had slammed against the building. She turned toward the window. The lightning flashed, illuminating the parking lot. Empty. Only the rain. She forced a nervous laugh. You're losing it, Grace. Then, her radio buzzed again. Dispatch. It was Officer Daniels, his voice low and uneasy. You sure the call came from Route 6? Yes, she said quickly. What? Because there's something weird out here. The road's covered in footprints. Bare ones. In the mud. But they just stop. The radio hissed. Daniels didn't speak again. Tanya tried to hail him 3 times. No answer. Her hands shook as she picked up the landline. Come on, pick up, but the line was dead. She exhaled sharply and stood up, pacing the narrow aisle between desks. The shadows seemed deeper now, stretching toward her like slow fingers. She swore she heard movement, a scrape, maybe from the far end of the room. Hello, she called. No response. She turned back toward her console and froze. Her headset lay on the desk, the microphone light glowing green. Active line. She hadn't touched it. The speakers crackled, and a faint whisper drifted through. Tanya, her name again. Who is this? She demanded. Identify yourself. The whisper grew clearer, layered, like her own voice overlapping itself. Tanya Grace. She backed away from the console, eyes wide. This isn't. The power flickered, plunging the room into darkness. Only the storm outside lit the windows, flashes of white tearing through the night. The generator kicked on a few seconds later, lights humming weakly back to life. When the monitors rebooted, her console showed a new incoming 911 call. Time, 4:13 a.m. Origin, line 1, console 3. Her line. Again. She hesitated, breath shaking, then pressed the button. County Dispatch, she said, her voice cracking. Go ahead. A whisper answered. He's here. It was her voice. Perfectly identical. Same tone, same pitch, same tremor of fear. She stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. Who's there? The whisper didn't answer. The storm raged louder outside, but through it, she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing down the hallway that led to the dispatch center's back door. She grabbed the emergency flashlight from a drawer and aimed it toward the door. The metal latch rattled once, twice. It opened. Rain blew in, cold and sharp. A figure stood silhouetted against the lightning, tall, faceless in the glare, soaked through. Tanya raised the flashlight, her breath catching in her throat. Stay where you are, she shouted. The figure didn't move. Then it spoke. Dispatch. Route 6 crash. The same voice from the recording. Her flashlight flickered and went out. When a morning crew arrived, the dispatch center was empty. Tanya's headset lay on the floor, the console still recording. The storm had passed. Her supervisor checked the logs. The last entry showed a call placed at 4:13 a.m. from console 3, Tanya's station. The recording lasted 12 seconds. Only one word was audible through the static. Help. Later that day, Officer Daniels was found on Route 6, his patrol car engine still running. No sign of crash, no damage, no blood. But his radio was on, and from it came a faint, distant whistling, low and rhythmic, as if someone were humming to themselves in an empty room. And every so often, between bursts of static, a woman's voice whispered through the line, calling for dispatch, calling for herself.